Let's go ahead and get right into the quarterback rankings, guys. And I have to tell you, I was very high on Eric Dungy at the beginning of the year. I told you guys that schedule was set for success, and sure the heck was. And I don't know what happened last week between Syracuse and Middle Tennessee, but Eric Dungy absolute laid an egg. And I have to tell you, if he was just any halfway decent, he'd be at the top of the list again this week with Syracuse playing Central Michigan. But he's not. So we have to take him back down a little bit, but I still have enough confidence in Eric Dungy and that Syracuse offense that they're going to score some points. You have to leave Eric Dungy in the top 10 right now. It's just too much potential for there not to leave him in. So who takes the number one spot, right? It has to belong to Baker Mayfield. You have to go with somebody that you know is going to definitely put up number one type points. He may not be the highest scorer this week, but when it comes to potential, it comes to security, and it comes to the schedule, Baker Mayfield's right there at the top, guys. He gets the top spot. Nick Shimonek at Texas Tech, which could be the highest scoring game this week, at number 2. And number 3, Shea Patterson. If you grabbed him early, a lot of people were concerned about the firing of Hugh Freeze. How is that going to affect Shea Patterson? Well, so far, it hasn't. And the good news is that Ole Miss has given up points, so Patterson's staying on the field longer, and a lot of his fantasy owners are really happy right now. And then Sam Darnold up at 5. And I have to tell you, I missed on Sam Darnold last week. I had him on the sit piece. I had him benched. And you know what? Look, I wasn't going to play Sam Darnold against Stanford. Lesson learned. I think we got a good idea of maybe what Darnold's going to do now after that bummer of a first week against Western Michigan. Hopefully he's got it right. Seems like he's got Stephen Mitchell and Deontay Burnett on the right. He's on the same page with them, ready to rock and roll. And number 6, and this is where we're going to start getting some of the matchups this week, Lamar Jackson, okay? A lot of emails coming in. Joe, should I or shouldn't I start Lamar Jackson against Clemson? Look what Clemson did to Auburn last week, and I get it. You know, I'll say that Clemson's defense over the past couple of years has been really, really good. But you have to go back to last year. You have to go back to Lamar Jackson's performance against Clemson, at Clemson, and use that as your baseline. And I think when you do that, I think you feel pretty comfortable starting Lamar Jackson at Clemson at home this week. So with Louisville being home, I think that offers a little bit of comfort to you to get Lamar Jackson in your lineup. The only way you're sitting him, guys, is if you absolutely have another guy that's maybe ranked right there, right alongside Lamar Jackson, somewhere in the top 10, that has just as good matchup, and you're playing in a one quarterback league. Number 10, Luke Falk, right? We have to put Luke Falk into the top 10. It seems like he's going to be starting again this week. Tyler Helinski came in. It was one of those situations last week where maybe it looked like he was pulled, went back in, got hurt, everybody wanting to know what's going on. And I have to tell you, if all of that shenanigans wouldn't have taken place, Luke Falk would probably be a top 5 quarterback this week. But like I said, you have to start putting the guys at the top of the list that you have the most security in when you're doing these rankings. And so for that reason, I have some security. I think Luke Falk gets to start. I think he plays, and he's playing Oregon State. And I'll be honest, I don't know if Oregon State wins another game this year. So I think he's in a really good spot to get back on track in week 3. Logan Woodside for Toledo, playing Tulsa in Toledo this week. Logan Woodside only had one game last year where he failed to throw 3 touchdowns in a game. He hasn't thrown 3 touchdowns in a game yet. He's already played 2 games. If Woodside is due for a big week, it's this week right now. I think you got to get him in your lineup. If he doesn't, this is a player that's on a tipping point. But there's too much talent on that Toledo offense. I think you've got to get Logan Woodside. I think you got to give him one more shot. This is the week to do it. And then number 12, I had Woodside and Quinton Flowers right next to one another. This is a big week for Quinton Flowers. To me, he hasn't looked overly impressive. There were some people in the beginning of the season, in the preseason, that were sending me emails saying, look, based on the South Florida schedule, Quinton Flowers should probably be number 1. Up until this point, guys, he has scared me. And I'm telling you, I don't see Quinton Flowers being dropped. I don't see a mass exodus from Quinton Flowers, but I'm telling you, this is a real pivotal matchup for him from a fantasy standpoint before fantasy owners have to start making some big decisions in the coming weeks. And you know, the opponent probably offers a really stiff test. Illinois goes to South Florida. Illinois just held Western Kentucky to 7 points. That's a real interesting matchup. I think for the simple fact that South Florida is at home makes Quinton Flowers a much safer play this week, and I think you've got to get him in your week 3 lineup. And then number 21, Tyler Huntley, quarterback Utah. To me, he's the wild card play this week. How much so? We'll get into that later on when we do start bench. He happens to land there. I think he's a start this week. You'll see why when we get there. Number 30, Shane Morris, Central Michigan, traveling to play Syracuse. I like Shane Morris. Matter of fact, I would really like Shane Morris if the wide receivers that he had aren't dropping like flies. First, he loses Tyler Conklin in the preseason, and now he loses Corey Willis. So now we're left with Mark Chapman and some other guys. And look, will it or will it not affect him? We don't know. This happened with Middle Tennessee last year. Middle Tennessee lost a lot of receivers at the beginning of the year, except Richie James. And Ty Lee stepped up and started making plays, who a lot of fantasy owners are benefiting from now that Ty Lee is playing some running back. But I think Shane Morris is still okay. I think he'll be okay playing at Syracuse this week. I would feel a lot more comfortable if Willis was in there. Morris might be a top 20 fantasy quarterback this week. But like I said, you have to have some security with some of these players, and that's what I don't have with a depleted wide receiver core. But Shane Morris is still top 30 for me. And number 36, Manny Wilkins, Arizona State, traveling to Texas Tech. We remember what happened with Texas Tech and Arizona State last year, right? Kalen Ballard scored 52 touchdowns in that game, or so it seemed. So here's the thing. I've already gotten some emails since I've posted the rankings last night about Manny Wilkins being number 36. And I have to say, yeah, his ceiling is higher than that. And yes, the over-under is very high. And yes, Manny Wilkins can definitely outperform his number 36 ranking. But the question is this: does Arizona State go in with the same mentality as they had last year? I don't know. If they do, that's another big game for Caleb Ballage, and I don't know if Manny Wilkins is going to come away in that game throwing 4 or 5 touchdowns. So, like I said, you have to go, and some of the rankings are reflective on what we know about guys. It is about the matchup, but you have to have some historical context as well. And for me, Manny Wilkins is in there at 36. And 2 more quarterbacks that I want to touch on before we move on to the running backs. 1, Jamar Smith, quarterback, Louisiana Tech. I know many of you have already dropped him, but I'm telling you right now, if you had the roster space, I was asking you to hold on to him for 1 more week. I think you have to give Jamar Smith 1 more week against an opponent like Western Kentucky as opposed to Mississippi State. To me, this is the tipping point for Jamar Smith this week, playing Western Kentucky. Okay, if he doesn't do anything this week, look, there's a reason we have him ranked 62. We haven't seen much from him. We don't have any confidence in him right now, but that doesn't mean that it won't build as the season progresses, because we know what that Louisiana Tech offense is capable of. They're not utilizing Teddy Veal, and the bottom line is they're just not able to utilize their receivers because Jamar Smith isn't getting them the ball. Real big week for Jamar Smith. He's not ranked high, but a player that I've got my eye on maybe more so than any other quarterback this week in the rankings. And then one name I'll throw out to you. I think he's a wild card play this week along with Tyler Huntley at Utah. And this is if you need a long shot. This is if you play in a deep FBS league. I think Hassan Klue, Charlotte quarterback playing NC A&T. Hassan Klue can do it with his legs, and I think he could have a big week this week. We have him ranked at 51. Like I said, it could be one of those boom or bust plays, but if you don't have a better option, the matchup is there, and Hassan Klue at Charlotte could give you a nice week this week at the quarterback position if you're hurting there. So that wraps it up for the quarterbacks. We're going to move on to the running backs now. Week 3. Atop of the rankings,